MicroBrewr Podcast, Session 18.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast. Here's your host, Nathan Pierce.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast. We talk about everything craft beer related with a focus on people looking at starting their own microbreweries or wanting to take their existing breweries to the next level. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce. This is a weekly podcast interviewing brewers and brewery owners going deep to get inside the industry and inside the heads of people who work there. We have show notes for all the episodes at microbrewer.com. So go to the website for show notes and other content. It's at microbrewer.com. Oh, by the way, I updated the show notes for the last episode. In episode 17, Chris Goulet told us about Sierra Nevada throwing out the first batch at their new brewery in North Carolina. I finally found an article online and I posted a link to it in the show notes for episode 17 at microbrewer.com/session 17. Please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher if you like the show so you won't miss any episodes. If you want a link to find MicroBrewr in iTunes, you could go to microbrewer.com/iTunes and that'll show you how to find it. In this episode, I talk with Nigel Askew from Horsefly Brewing Company in Montrose, Colorado. Nigel has so many neat stories, it was hard to keep this episode short. In the pre-interview talk, he was telling me about homebrewing for his dad as a teenager in Zambia. Nigel grew up at a boarding school in Scotland, and he traveled on vacation and holidays to see his mother and father in Zambia, Africa. His dad worked at one of the mines there, and he could get just one kind of beer. So Nigel would buy malt extract and hops and take it home to make beer. You just got what they had, no choosing hop varieties. So I guess each batch was different. His dad probably relished the variety after drinking the same old stuff through the rest of the year. Anyway, Nigel's full of stories. He shares some of them in today's episode. He talks about homebrewing in the Los Angeles area and then opening his own brewery in Colorado with a 1.5 barrel system and expanding to their current 10 barrel system in a basement of a former Kentucky Fried Chicken. He has great advice about working with regular suppliers to keep prices down, going directly to suppliers of large equipment to get great deals, and lots of other things. Here's the interview. Hey, Nigel, I introduced you to the listeners, so please take a few minutes and let us know more about you and your brewery.
Okay. From a history point of view of my brewing experience, I started really brewing, real all-grain brewing in 1992. I built my own brewing system, your classic Sankey keg, cut out and gravity fed in my garage, and then I translated up eventually to a 50-gallon system that I built out of stainless. Even the skid was stainless, 2 pumps and a gas manifold and a little control panel, and that was about 96, 7. And built my own brewery barn on the RV pad that came off the back alley, and even bought my own little cold room actually from a brewer in Pasadena, a small little cold room. Put my stuff in there, and eventually, after a while, I decided I wanted to get out of the Southern California area and bought a motel here in Montrose, and brought my brew system with me. And a local police sergeant had just started a homebrew club, and he came zooming around the very first week I got here and heard about my awesome system that I had, which for a homebrew was, I suppose, quite impressive, and wanted to get me involved in the club and stuff. And eventually, he came several years later, and the motel was not doing well because of the Great Recession. About 2008, late, he said, let's go up to this brewery in Paonia, little tiny place. He brews on a 32-gallon system. You've got a 50-gallon system, and he brews and he sells all the beer he wants. And we went up and talked to Mike King, is his name, Revolution Brewing. And he told us, yeah, just get yourself a manufacturer's license and a wholesaler's license, and you can have at it. You can't serve anybody else's drink, but you won't mind that because you'll be making all the beer that you want to make, and that's all you can sell outside of soft drinks. So we started in a little front office of a storage unit. It used to be the office area of a storage unit, about 1,000 square feet total. And we stuck a little brew deck in there, and we bought a little 6x11 cold room, and we built our own little bar, about 14 seats, not including what we could get seated outside. And it was up the outskirts of town. And when we opened, Tom Hennessy, who has had several breweries, about 6 or 7, and he owns the Colorado Boy in Ridgeway, which will probably be his last brewery. He said, yeah, you're already too small, you know. And we said, nah, go on. You know, we're just starting. Within a year, we had to move to where we are now, and we just have been expanding ever since. So we moved from a 1.5 barrel to a 8 to 10 barrel. And I've just built the new brew house, and I'm looking at a kettle right now that I had fabricated out of a cylindrical tank. I found about 8 of them down in Missouri, Arkansas border. Bought them for a song, and I had one converted into a kettle. And that's going to be about 600 gallons, so almost 20 barrels, although my brights are only 10. So I'm 10 barrels really, I suppose. That's where we're at now.
Are you going to get bigger bright tanks?
Not in this location. There just isn't the room. We've expanded. I mean, since we moved into what was Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it was actually had been a Kentucky Fried Chicken, had been converted into a home health company's offices.
That's kind of ironic, huh?
Yeah, and it was all carpeted, and offices had been built within. So we stripped all the carpet out and knocked the walls down, and there was the original KFC tile, and you could see where the counter had been, where the kitchen started, where the customer area was. And if you stand outside and you look at a picture of also, you can say to yourself, "Yep, that was a Kentucky Fried Chicken." And then we had to build a cold room out right where the drive-through window used to be, which is now just a closet behind the bar. And we built a cold room out there for the brights. And then a year later, we built an outside bar outside of that and another cold room. And with what was left over of that, the year after that, we built a cold room and a walk-in freezer on the other side. And my brew house is right next to this little tiny kitchen. And we're going to expand the little kitchen into the brew house. And that's why we built this new brew house in the back. We're done. We've got no more space left. We've got an outside patio and a top patio in the front, and very little else. We've come to the edges of the property.
Well, so you moved there a year after being open in 2010, right?
We opened in 2009, 9 of 9, at this little place, this little storage unit office I told you about, and we had a little room that we had an air conditioner in, and that was how we kept the brews cool while we were fermenting. And we bought very inexpensive cylindrical, 60-gallon cylindriconicals at the time. That's all we could afford. We just put in what we had both saved, about $8,000 each, I think. Was it $9,000, I think? Bought 4 bright beer tanks of 50 gallons. And 4 cylindriconicals, and we just kept rotating them round and round and round. So the newest brew would get shoved in front of the big 10,000 BTU air conditioner to keep it as cool as we could get it. And it worked. And then when we made the next brew, the next day, we moved that fermenter away and put the next fermenter in front of the air conditioner. And people just flocked to the place. It was standing room only. First brewery in Montrose.
AC beer.
Beg your pardon?
Air-conditioned beer.
Air-conditioned beer, yeah.
So in the pre-interview talk, you said you're 50% partners. So does that mean you started your brewery with, you said 8,000 or 9,000 each? You started
Yes.
a brewery with $18,000?
Yep.
Wow.
Right.
That's
Yep.
incredible.
Yeah, well, we had our. I remember I had brought my brew house with me, the 50-gallon
Oh,
thing
right.
from,
You had
from
the 50-gallon
California, so
system.
that helped. And we bought the cold room, the 6x11 cold room. I think we took there was a restaurant sale, and so we bought that for about $1,000. Each of the brand spanking new things we got from China, the cylindriconicals and the bright beer tanks / serving tanks were about $700 each. So we were very, very frugal. And I think that's the secret as to how to do it, is you don't go spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and go from that to that kind of debt overnight. We just did a lot of sweat equity. When we built the new horse fly where we are now, we were the ones tearing out the carpet. We were the ones building the bar, decorating the place, painting. We got old tables from an old, it was a Mexican food chain. I can't remember its name now. And we just tore all the tiles off the tables and put on all. My partner is very creative. She's a very artsy, crafty kind of person. Her husband and I are the ones who really work together, but she's technically my partner. So the two of them are my partner, if you like. And she was very creative. And each table had its own theme, and then we just poured bar top over the tables and created a nice shiny surface and buried all the decorative stuff in under the bar top. Very inexpensive way to do it. We did that for the bar itself as well. And we had all our friends come in and burn their initials on the bar and put bottle tops on it and coasters and beer-related things, and then just poured bar top on the top. And that's how we built our bar. And then just a lot of FrankenBrew. The brew house, the 8 to 10 gallon brew house, is 3 Grundy tanks converted. One is a hot liquor tank, hardly had any conversion at all, apart from a skirt around the bottom. The mash tun, just chopped the top of the Grundy tank off. And then we use a copper manifold, just homebrew style, like big 1-inch pieces of copper pipe with slits on the underneath, and a manifold. And then the kettle we cut the top of a Grundy off, and we added skirt on the bottom and built it up on the top to about a 260 gallon capacity.
You guys patch together a lot of stuff. Do you have engineers or mechanics on your team?
Nope. We just did a lot of, as Tom Hennessy calls it, FrankenBrewing. You take something that was designed to be used for something else. Like we have an open fermenter downstairs. It's not really open. I mean, it's got lids. It's a milk tank. And the lids come down, and it has its own built-in cooling system, and just sanitize it and then cover it with a visqueen sheet of plastic, like the stuff you lay down when you're painting. And then put some heavy cloth on top of that so the light doesn't get in. And there you go. You got yourself an open fermenter, originally designed to be a milk tank. It's all right. It all turned out fine.
Well, speaking of the creative friends and whatnot, I saw that your beer labels on your website look pretty cool, the hand-drawn sort of stuff. Who's doing that?
Yes, an artist, and her husband's an illustrator. So he illustrates and she designs them. And we decided to come up with names. I'm personally kind of old-fashioned English person, so I'm of the mentality of not naming beers. But my partner wanted to, so we got Cabernet Red and that kind of stuff. 6-shooter pale ale. So
Jazzy Razzy's pretty fun. That gigantic horsefly playing the saxophone.
Yes.
The notes are coming out of his saxophone with the raspberries.
Yes. It was originally, my suggestion when they talked about naming was to do different musical themes. And different musical themes for different kinds of beer. That was the original idea. But anyway, it went into this sort of Western thing, and it's turned out all right.
Well, the Highland Scottish I don't pick up the Western thing from that one.
Yeah, no, I
You got
don't
the
really.
bagpiper with a gigantic sword.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a mishmash. It really is. It's kind of like the Peacemaker Pale Ale is most certainly in that style. The Taberno Red is in the painted skull tradition of Mexico. Pasofino Porter is, well, that's pretty Westernish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the 6-shooter pale ale.
6-shooter, of course. Yep.
It's a gigantic horsefly with some 6-shooters shooting hop
Shoot
cones
hops
out of his barrels.
Yes, exactly. Pretty fun.
Well, thanks for broadening the picture of your brewery and how you got started and whatnot. That's a pretty inspirational story, starting a brewery off of $18,000. Can you give us sort of your core values or core words? Do you guys have an operating principles that you're operating by?
Well, I would say that I think our essential motto, if you want to call it that, by which we live, as it were, is to be fair and honest to customers with regards to the product, the prices, and the service, and to be the same to our staff as regards expectations of performance. We try to be not corporate as much as we can, and being fair to honest with customers. I mean, we've expanded to a little concession at the airport in the departure lounge, the secure area after you go through the TSA check when they check you with metal detectors and all that good stuff. And there was absolutely nothing in there, so they asked us to open a sort of a sub horsefly out there, and we call it Airfly. And we have a small selection of beer and food and snacks and sandwiches and some hot stuff. Very, very, very busy in the ski season. We only experienced one half of a ski season so far. And we could have gouged the customers. I mean, we could take them for anything we wanted, but we don't do that. I mean, we charged a little bit more than we charge at the brew pub. And we could charge way more. Because you've got them. They're a captive audience. Nobody else.
They're stuck after they get through security. They can't leave.
They can't leave, and they are regularly delayed because, of course, it's the ski season. And that's when most of the traffic goes through that airport. It's about 100,000 a year, and of that 100,000, 70,000 go through in the ski season from December through March, beginning of April. So.
Well, just since the end of 2009, it sounds like you guys have had some great successes expanding to a former KFC with a basement and even taking on the Airfly at the airport.
Yep.
Let's go deep, though. Tell me the biggest mistake you ever made as a brewery owner.
Biggest mistake? Wow.
There must be one.
There must be one. I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of a really big one. I mean, I suppose one of the mistakes would have been trusting vendors. We had a vendor that when we first opened up here at the Main Street location here at what used to be the KFC, was just trusting a vendor to the person. One of the big companies supplies food, and they were just charging us up the yin yang, and we weren't really aware. We thought, well, I guess they're all the same, whether it be A, B, C, or D, in national food vendors, but they started jacking the price up, and we really were too naive to keep having them compete with another vendor to keep them both honest. I would say that would definitely have been a mistake in our first year.
You guys have a pretty extensive food menu, so I would imagine that's kind of important. So once you've already established a relationship and you're moving forward with purchasing things from one vendor, how do you make sure that they're not doing that? What did you learn from that? Or what advice could you give to somebody else to sort of keep check on the prices from their vendors?
Literally, we went and found the rep for another vendor and another one after that, and had them come in and check out what the current vendor was was charging us for this, that, and the other, whether it be crate of tomatoes or mushrooms or head of lettuce or roast beef, cold roast beef, the various meats, deli meats. And we've found to our shock that they were really gouging us by a long way. And so we just got another vendor to come in and give us the better prices, and we've been doing that ever since. So don't trust just one vendor. Always make sure that you've got competition in the products that you're buying, the various products, and then that goes for the brewing supplies as well.
Compare prices and periodically compare them again.
Oh, exactly.
So you had trouble thinking of a big mistake. If you could start your brewery over again, would you do anything differently? Is there any way you could have done it better?
Well, when we started, we had someone else come in and do the food part. And that was probably our biggest mistake, because we really didn't want to be involved in food, and we did everything we could to avoid it. But really, when you have a brew pub, if you don't do food, and we found this out in the little place we had, we didn't have any food. We had menus of different restaurants you could order and bring your food with you. We had a barbecue outside, a barbecue grill outside. And you could bring meat if you wanted to cook it. But
that's cool. You had a barbecue set up for your customers to cook their own stuff.
Right. This is in the little place. And it just didn't work. I mean, people wanted to be able to come in, order food, and then they would stay. They wanted to stay and drink beer, but because there was no food, they didn't want to order in. It just didn't suit the mentality of the customer, I guess. And so they would have a couple of beers and leave. And so we did okay, just because we were the only craft brew in the area. But once we moved in here, we had the people that we had rented the unit from. They had done catering in the past, and so they started doing the kitchen part of it. And but it just became a very antagonistic relationship, and they were constantly, trying to double check on us to make sure we weren't screwing them over or something. And in the end, they wanted to go off and help their son, who had started catering up in the Bakken oil field up in North Dakota. So they went off to do that and sold us the kitchen for pretty cheap. So we started doing it ourselves. So
you got to have food from the start and do it yourself.
Yep, absolutely.
So take us to the other side of the spectrum now. We heard about some mistakes, some things you'd like to improve. Tell us about the best idea you ever had for your business.
Probably purchasing before they really took off, purchasing our equipment from direct negotiation from China. I mean, I bought our first those tanks. I didn't realize we could be so tall. I told you about earlier. I bought 4 of those, a heat exchanger. What else? Something else for about $12,000. Delivered. That's astonishingly inexpensive. That's not the case any longer, because they've cottoned on to what prices are charged in this country, and the manufacturers in this country have cottoned on to what the Chinese were charging. So it's brought the prices more reasonable in this country, and they've gone up in China. So now it's not worth the effort. And that one of the mistakes I made was getting a second lot of tanks from China, and it was a huge headache in comparison.
So it saved you a lot of money before, and it's not necessarily something that you could
not necessarily
again.
The case now. No, I mean they're fabricators now more and more that where you can get a very reasonably priced brew house. I mean, I could get I know of one. It's in the Vancouver area. You can get a direct fire control brew house on a skid. 15 barrel, about $35,000. It's called Brew Stuff. That's very reasonable.
Has there been a moment when you realized that you finally succeeded?
I think we've slowly succeeded. We've realized the moment has been, and there have been several moments where we've looked back and gone, good Lord, wasn't that long ago we were a 1.5 barrel system. And it's just rolled from there. It's just snowballed. From there, we're getting numbers in the middle of winter that we would have been very pleased with in the middle of summer when we first opened up here at the, what I suppose we call the KFC location. Yeah, so we sort of more slowly improved and not overextended. And I think that we've been very pleased about that we've just grown.
And what's been your favorite memory since opening the brewery?
We had a band here one night on a Monday night, and they were called Cutthroat Shamrock, and they just said, we'll come and just play for tips and beer. And they really nearly became a nationwide band. They've broken up since, but just everybody came out of the woodwork to hear these people. They were just phenomenal. They were a sort of a cross between bluegrass and Celtic and rock and God knows what else. And it said that this was a Monday night 2-3 years ago, and the patio was packed with people. People just called each other, and there was no room left.
Was that a local band?
It was a band out of Knoxville, Tennessee.
What could you tell an aspiring home brewer? What's the most important thing for someone starting a brewery or wanting to start a brewery? What's the most important thing that they can start doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow? Well, planning is obviously important. And I wouldn't say overplan. I would say don't overplan. Don't try and think of every single thing before you take the first step. Just start small. Just think of a slightly bigger version of a home brewery. Start small and build from there. Don't go from home brewing to 20 barrels or 30 barrels or 40, whatever, and spend $1 million on the brand spanking new equipment and everything. So you don't know how it's going to go. If you start small and it fails, you can start small again somewhere else. But if you go big, you've got investors that now want to know what you did. Because you're sure as hell not going to have that kind of money if you're starting from being a home brewer. You won't have that kind of money in the bank. Yeah, I would say start small and just expand, just like we did. Minimize debt, maximize self-effort, be innovative with equipment, just like the FrankenBrewery thing I told you about. That's Tom Hennessy's word for it. He has a great book that you'll be well served to read before you start. It's called I think it's called the Brewery Operations Manual, and he tells you how to start a brewery with on a dime, with very little. He did it himself.
So don't be afraid to start small, but start planning now and start moving.
Yes, a lot of people have trouble just pulling the trigger. You just got to not overthink it.
Okay, thanks for sharing those tips. Now we have a question from one of our listeners, Christine Doobie, who asks, what are the pros and cons of whole cone hops versus compressed hop pellets?
I only use compressed pellets, mainly because whole cone hops do not stay as fresh as long, and 2, they take up a heck of a lot of room. They take up a lot more room. But if you're not turning out your hops really, really quickly, then you probably want to go pellet. And if you can, find a vacuum system so you keep the oxygen out. or buy it in lesser amounts and keep them in the freezer.
How long can you keep hops versus how long can you refrigerate pellets?
Having not done it, I don't know exactly, but I would think that whole cone would probably be lifetime would probably be measured in weeks, and not very many weeks either. A couple of weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the storage facility. I mean, if you've got them in and they've come to you vacuum packed, and those vacuum things that squish everything right down, then they'll last because there's no air. And if you've got them in the cold room and they haven't been opened up, but once they're opened up, I'd say you've probably got a couple of weeks. But where pellet hops for the weight to surface area ratio is much greater. In other words, there's a lot less surface area exposed to the air in a pellet hop, so it doesn't degrade nearly as quickly. It oxidize the essential oils that you're wanting to capture.
How long can you keep them in refrigeration?
Well, you can keep them for months.
Can you freeze them?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely. You get more out of them too. They're more efficient. Because they've been crushed, they're crushed. The hops go through the hops go through this dye when they get macerated essentially into a sort of a I don't know what you would call it, a paste, and then they push them out of dye.
So do you have the whole cone within the pellet? Are you missing out anything?
No, they just strip the cones off. I'm not a hop expert. But that's what I have gathered is they just basically they hang the binds up on this conveyor and it goes along, and then these different kinds of machines just rip all the cones off, and then they separate the cones from the leaves and the stalks, and then those cones get either put into vacuum packaging into big bales, and then the bales go to vacuum packaging usually in 44 or 11 pound packages. I don't know if that's the case with whole. But it is with pellets. It's usually come in 44 and 11s. I don't know why they chose those numbers, but
got to keep it odd.
Yeah, it's weird.
Can you get the same kinds in pellets as you can in whole cones?
99% yes.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you'll find that certain vendors will only have these in whole and these in pellet.
It looks like Montrose is kind of a smallish town. There's about 20,000 people there, and looking on the map, it looks like there's lots of open space. Is there anybody growing hops near you over there?
Yes.
Colorado?
Yes, there are. Several have opened since I moved here in 2004.
All right. Now it's time for happy hour. The next set of questions, they're a little bit lighter. We're going to get to know each other a little better, have some fun, and get inside the industry. Are you ready, Nigel?
Sure.
Cans or bottles?
Cans. Absolutely. There's no competition. You've got a light protection with a can. It's lighter. It's much more environmentally conscious. It's much more recyclable. There's a very few recycling places have the ability to crush the glass and then remelt it.
What's the most challenging beer you've ever made?
Probably a pumpkin ale, because I'm kind of a purist, so I like to use real pumpkin, and I don't just throw a few pumpkin spices and call it pumpkin ale, which a lot of people do. They don't even put pumpkin in it, and it's a pain because you got to get all that pumpkin flesh, and you got to put it in the. I've tried it in the mash. I've tried it in the boil. Makes a bunch of tube in the bottom of the boil kettle.
Tell me one.
But also making a winter warmer and putting it into whiskey barrels. That's an interesting extra task to be done, but it really makes the difference.
Tell me one beer style that you think will be gaining more attention.
My partner just came in and went, "Oh my God!" Sees me with my headphones on and everything. And he just walked back in the cold room. Oh my God! What be gaining more session beers? I think we've gone through the cycle of imperial this, imperial that, major. Come back to take a photograph of me now. All these beer styles that they have to like go over the top and make these huge beers out of everything. Imperial brown ale, and I've got a double IPA, and that's as far as I'm going. My winter warmer is strong, but then it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be for the dead of winter. And but yeah, I think the session beers are going to become more of the thing now. People want to be able to drink more flavor and less alcohol, and you can drink several and not have to worry about falling over flat in your face.
If you're going to make a 5-gallon batch at home this weekend, what beer would you make?
I would make a bock. My favorite beers are lagers, mostly. Pilsners, bocks, Oktoberfests, Doppelbocks. That's just what I like. I'm not a big hophead. I love making hoppy beer, but I don't like drinking it. The bittering, some of these pale ales are just ridiculous. I mean, even 50 IBUs is too much for my palate. I like a little bitterness especially I like bitterness in a Pilsner, actually. And I think I make a pretty decent Pilsner. It's my style. I like it crisp, but intense bitterness it just attacks the palate to me. So I lean more towards the malty beers, the Irish Reds, oatmeal stout. Like I said, the Southern German big lagers. That's my cup of tea. That's probably what I would make. But I'd make 10, because if you're going to make 5, you might as well make 10.
Oh, 10-gallon batch.
If you make a good beer, you're going to be really pissed off when you come to the end of your 48 bottles.
Yeah, totally. Can you suggest a book for our audience that will help them succeed in opening a brewery?
Yes, the one I mentioned to you earlier, Tom Hennessy's book, is called Brewery Operations Manual. It's all about starting a brewery on a very, very small budget. For technique, bless his heart, he's no longer with us, but Greg Noonan's New Brewing Lager Beer is an excellent book, and it's although it's talking about lager, essentially the book covers everything. It's got enough science to be dangerous, if you like. Enough science to back up your techniques and make you understand, but not so much that you feel like you're in a UC Davis intense program or something. It's practical science in that book, and it's very all encompassing. Great book, New Brewing Lager Beer. For styles, you can't beat Jamil Zainashev. He's written the book with Palmer, and it's an excellent book for style. You really can't go too wrong on it.
Give us one last piece of advice for someone who just brewed the first batch at their new brewery, and then we'll close up the brew house for the night.
Just brewed their first batch. Just when you're brewing, sanitize. I mean, if there's one word you constantly need to think about, it's the word sanitize. Clean and sanitize. You're really the head janitor when you're a brewer. There's more cleaning in than anything else, and sanitizing. So when you've just brewed your first beer, you want to make sure that you've sanitized everything that beer's going into, or you're going to lose it. And you've just got to constantly think, where were my hands last? What did I last touch? before I touch this piece of equipment, if that piece of equipment is going to come into contact with the beer. So always be thinking, what did I do with my hands? If I can't remember, I immerse my hands in sanitizer and make sure that they're now sterile.
Well, hey, Nigel, it's been fun talking with you. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for all the great tips in starting and operating a successful brewery. Tell us how we can stay in touch with you, and then we'll set this episode aside to ferment.
Okay, wonderful. Well, nice talking to you too. Nigel at horseflybrewing.com. You can call the brewery too if you want. Anybody can call for advice if they want to. I'm more than happy. No point reinventing the wheel. You can always call me for advice.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Nigel. Thanks again, Nigel Askew, for being on the MicroBrewr podcast. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time, your stories, and your advice. And listeners, thank you too. It's really neat seeing the downloads each week and knowing that you appreciate the podcast. I hope you're getting a lot out of it. Let me know what you think at the show notes for this episode, microbrewer.com/session18. You can leave your comments there, and that's where you'll find the links and the resources mentioned in this episode. Also, you can get a link to Horsefly Brewing Company online. Go there and let Nigel know that you appreciate him sharing his advice. The show notes are at microbrewer.com/session18. And if you like the show, please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher. When you subscribe, you'll have every episode sent straight to you as soon as it comes out. If you want a link on how to find MicroBrewr in iTunes, go to microbrewer.com/iTunes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, support your local brewery, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to MicroBrewr Podcast with Nathan Pierce. We'll see you right here next time at microbrewer.com.
If you want more resources for starting a craft brewery, check out microbrewer.com, microbrewer.com. If you want to become a Cicerone certified beer server, check out beerexamschool.com for free study guide and flashcards for the certified beer server exam. beerexamschool.com.